President Joe Biden falling on stage at a commencement of members of the Air Force and making headlines all across the country. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. We'll talk a little bit more about that and get your reaction. But to the other segment, we were just discussing naturalization ceremonies. Somewhat of a graduation, right? But you've got a rather large naturalization ceremony that happened in Chicago. The Chicago Sun-Times reporting on this, talking about how 24 people were there with family and friends. You've got 18 to 80 years old from 17 countries being sworn in before a White Sox game earlier this week. Very cool. Thumbs up. That's the way to do it, and I think a lot of people see this as just an immensely important thing that migrants can do in this country, is the process of naturalization, which a lot of times, again, I'd argue that those who go through the laborious nature of getting naturalized in this country, they have to know the history of the country, the Constitution, the importance of it, and I imagine that they probably know more about it than a lot of you out there who were born in this country and slept through civics class in high school. So maybe we should do that sometime, is to have somebody who's naturalized take a test, and then have somebody who's just been, an American citizen their entire life take that same test and see who scores better. But I did get some information here. I asked as to when is the next naturalization ceremony here in Springfield, and somebody with the know says June 15th, 2:30 at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. So a naturalization ceremony is going to be taking place here in Springfield June 15th in the afternoon at the ALPLM. So if you know people who have been waiting to get the word, that's at least an unofficial word here from somebody in the know of what's going on and around the Springfield community when it comes to conventions and a variety of other things. So thumbs up on that naturalization ceremony being scheduled for later on this month. Just in like 2 weeks. So on the idea of naturalization, it is very much kind of like a graduation ceremony. And I think it is important, and you've got a headline here that really looks at, I think, something that we need to revisit and reflect upon, and that is the impact of school closures on students from the COVID-19 pandemic, and how detrimental that was, and how the governors of states across the country saying, hey, don't go to school, kids. Stay on the computer and look at your screens, and maybe you'll learn something. Well, the Chicago Tribune headline, Class of COVID. For this year's graduating seniors, the pandemic dominated and defined high school. And that, I think, is something we have to reflect on. It's a long piece, goes into a bunch of different individuals who had to experience high school through the lens of COVID-19 and how that's impacted them, not just mentally, but physically, and they're graduating now. Most of their high school experience dealt with the COVID mandates that were put on them based off of stuff that we're finding out now, like, the vaccines, people who got vaccinated had COVID-19 instances at a high rate. The vaccines apparently just don't really, do what they were advertised to do what they, even President Biden saying it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's obviously propaganda and wasn't necessarily the case. And you saw the insistence of continuing all these mandates that seem to have done more harm than actual good. So students being really at the brunt of that impact. And I think it's important to recognize that those graduating this year from high school, boy, oh boy, did they go through, they went through the thick of it. There's no question. Obviously, our healthcare workers also went through the thick of it, dealing with all kinds of different issues, not just COVID. I mean, everybody else still had other ailments going on outside of COVID. But while we recognize healthcare workers, I think it's the students as well that we have to reflect upon and realize the negative impacts to those young people who, a lot of them, are graduating this year. All right, let's take a couple of calls here at 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Hey, Greg, I can't disagree with anything that you've said. That being said, which there's always a but with me, is that what we did with my granddaughter who was in school, who I sent you a picture of her, what we did was we set her up her own little classroom And her parents did what parents are supposed to do, which is they made sure that she was online every day, that she did the work that was assigned to her every day. They did what I call parenting. And I think that is a big part of what didn't happen. Now, she is in the 4th grade, and she tests at about a sophomore in high school level.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, there's no question that a lot of people, they definitely excelled. A lot of young people excelled learning at home. And that's the case for a good chunk of people. However, on the flip side, that wasn't the case for a lot of young people who didn't have that structure at home. And the parents may have been working. You know, a lot of parents had to go to the grocery store where they worked because grocery stores are still open and operating. That's a different story from somebody who is able to stay home because they do office work. So there's definitely some, how would you say, disparities in how children ultimately, whatever the outcome was in their educational situation.
And I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that there are many instances, or at least there's an instance I can point to directly that says, now the one thing that says she did fine. Now the one problem that she does have, and I've noticed this, is in her relationships with other people, she's about, or started this school year, probably a year behind. Yeah. You know, she was acting like a 3rd grader, not a 4th grader, and you know, that was because she didn't have the interaction of her peers during COVID. Sure. Yeah. That's caught up, though, by the end of the school year. So, you know, there's two sides of the coin, and you're absolutely right. But there are success stories also, and we also need to remember that.
Right on. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for the call. 217-629-7970. Good morning. Thanks for hanging on. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Greg. Hey, just bringing up COVID again, did you see any information or articles about that Jamie Foxx and how he has a blood clot and he didn't really want to get the shot?
I didn't see any headlines as to what his ailment was, other than it was, you know, like a suspicious ailment that he was in rehab recovering from, and a lot of people shocked at it. But I don't know any other specifics other than that. 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Yes, you were talking about immigrants earlier and how the young people haven't bothered paying attention to
civics class. Right.
Well, I believe the teachers union quit teaching civics decades ago.
I don't know about decades ago, but yeah, there's a continued insistence on teaching about government and the importance of our Constitution, but you can see how other mandates might actually start eating away at it, because there's only enough time in a school day, right? There's only enough time. And if you're requiring to teach about, say, you know, issue A that might be politically sensitive, that's going to eat into the time allotted to teach about, you know, the founding of this country, the principles of the Constitution, the principles of our Bill of Rights. And the more mandates you get from other issues that might be, again, politically sensitive, it's just going to crowd out other important things that people need to understand. Because if we don't understand our rights and where they don't come from government. Government does not give you the right to free speech. Government does not give you the right to keep and bear arms. These are inalienable rights, meaning they come from something bigger than government. Because government is not your ruler. You are a sovereign. You are an individual. You have free will. You have a conscience. And it's not government that gives that to you. It's inalienable. And if we lose sight of that, I think that it could be of our detriment. Let's now, after talking about graduation and naturalization, let's hear what President Biden had to say yesterday during an event at Air Force Academy, and he was there welcoming new graduates for the U.S. Air Force. And well, he kind of didn't know what a pilot was. He seemed to kind of just stumble on trying to talk about the pilots that were going to be flying overhead. Here's President Biden.
I met with those guys that fly over shortly. You heard of them, haven't you? 3 of them are women.
That's kind of creepy.
So don't screw around, guys.
What?
And the highest percentage of minority cadets.
So listen to it again.
I met with who are those guys that fly over shortly?
Why is that so quiet?
You've heard of them, haven't you? 3 of them are women. So don't screw around, guys.
All right. So he couldn't necessarily explain what a pilot was. He's like, who are those guys that are going to be flying over here soon? Fighter pilots. And he says 3 of them are women. Better watch out, guys. Says it in the kind of a creepy way, getting down close to the microphone. But then again, he walked away from the podium and took a pretty nasty spill, which the White House says the president's just fine. But oh boy, that was quite a spill. Oh, he's down. Oh man, that's wild. All right, 217-629-7970. We'll take one last call before the break, even though I probably shouldn't. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Well, good morning, Greg. Yes, you were talking about these civics classes and such. My grandson just passed his civics class at his school, so I'm pretty sure they're still teaching it.
They're still teaching it.
They're great. Pardon me?
They're still teaching it.
Yeah, that's what I heard someone say they weren't anymore. But another thing on a side note, do you hear about those 30 gunshots last night over on off of 12th and so on the east side? Last night there's like
not. I think
no one has,
it's the first time I'm hearing about it, so we'll see what the newsroom can drum up. Appreciate the calls. Got to take a break and wrap this program up. It's now 8:52.